Hi, my name's Londe Yusuf,
And my name is Reggie Williams.
and we're the co-founders of Black Film Space. Black Film Space is a grassroots organization dedicated to enhancing the skill sets of Black filmmakers and building a community of creatives. We host events such as screenwriting workshops, panels, mixers, and other events that are designed to support Black content creators.
In our next episode of the Black Film Space podcast, we interview Zandashe Brown. Zandashe is an award-winning genre filmmaker born and bred in Louisiana. Brown writes and directs stories primarily within the horror genre that showcase her perspective on identity, spirituality, and healing for Black women in the American South. Her latest short, Blood Runs Down, has won multiple awards, including being in a 2018 official Black Star Film Festival selection, Overlook Film Festival selection, and Woman in Horror Film Festival selection, amongst many more. Before we begin the interview, we have a few brief announcements about our events in spring 2019. On Friday, April 12th, the co-founders of Black Film Space, myself, and Londe Yusuf, will be moderating a screenwriting workshop in Dumbo, Brooklyn as part of the Black Web Fest. On Thursday, April 25th, we're hosting our monthly screenwriting workshop at Studios 150 in Midtown Manhattan from 7 to 10 p.m. Lastly, we're hosting our 4th annual screenwriting retreat from June 19th to June 23rd. The Black Film Space Screenwriting Retreat is a 5-day, 4-night excursion designed to offer screenwriters a quiet space to focus on their writing and connect with like-minded creatives. We also incorporate optional writing workshops, yoga, meditation sessions, table dinners, and nature walks. The deadline for the first deposit is April 1st. For more info on all these events, go to blackfilmspace.com. Now, on to our interview. So, Zandashe, thank you for joining the Black Film Space podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're very excited to interview you. The producer, or one of the producers of this podcast, was really excited to bring you on, particularly because you are a Black woman in the horror genre. We're really looking forward to the insight that you can provide to our audience. I'd like to just get started in regards to how you got into the horror genre and what inspired you to make films.
Well, I grew up watching horror films with my mom mostly. It was sort of a tradition of ours. We'd go to Blockbuster. She would get maybe an action film, a scary movie, and I'd get a cartoon and Goosebumps or something like that. But I would always end up watching her movies with her. So it's just kind of, it's the content that I was raised on. I mean, which could be questionable, but I grew up with it more so than I did Disney or anything else. And I think I've always wanted to be a storyteller in some way. I started writing very early on. I would write these little short stories in between class periods or after I finished work in middle school. And then I would take a sheet of white paper and like draw a cover on it and staple it like it was a book, pass it around to people, and it was a hit. I mean, the stories were really bad, but I've always written in that way. I used to want to be a novelist, and I guess sometime in high school it just clicked that my love for horror and film, that was the storytelling medium that I wanted to take.
Okay. Yeah, that is definitely an interesting upbringing in regards to like I know for me it was like The Lion King and Aladdin and things like that. So the fact that you watch a lot of horror movies that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think The Lion King maybe at age 17
Oh
because I just
wow.
felt left out. I was like, let me catch up and see what this is
Yeah,
about.
yeah. So in your artist statement, you say that you believe your work in the horror genre will promote sympathy for Black bodies and minds to larger audiences by showcasing our vulnerability. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think when a horror film works really well, you are in the shoes of the protagonist who's literally trying to survive. So you're rooting for them. If the stakes are high enough, they feel high for yourself as well. And I've grown up, and most of the rest of the world has grown up watching and rooting for white people on screen. And that's outside of horror, but like I said, those stakes are listed in horror so much. So it was super interesting for me when Get Out came out. It was also, I was shocked, I didn't see it coming. For the first time, Black people, or for one of the first times, not the first, for the first time in this huge, like, transcendent way, non-Black audiences as well were literally rooting for a Black person to survive. And I think people need to question how many times in their life they've actually done that. How many times have you really cared for the stakes of people who don't look like you? Because you don't see them on screen that often. It's just not the norm.
Yeah.
So I think horror is like a great medium to, just to showcase a certain type of intensity.
Okay. And in your work, do you, or I guess, how much do you care that the audience isn't Black?
I make my work with Black audiences in mind first, but I do hope that anyone and everyone can see it and relate to it. It's just, like Jordan Peele came out recently with a statement that said, after Us came out, he said, I don't see myself casting any films with white people as leads. Like, I've already seen that movie. That's where I'm at. That's how I feel. So yeah, those movies are already out there. My cast, my stories are going to be centered around Black people, people of color, Black women specifically, and specifically people in the South. Like, those are all underrepresented categories. And I think everyone needs to take in those perspectives more. So I would hope that wide audiences could view my work.
Yeah. I think for us, it was like 30%, or at least the opening weekend was like 30% white people, 30% Black people, and I think you bring up a valid point in regards to just people rooting for Black people and a diverse audience rooting for Black people. I think that's incredibly powerful.
Right, whether they realize it or not, some things can be a bit pushy, and I think the race theme was very forward in Get Out, which it should have been, and it worked well. But even for us or other films where Black people have been in the lead, you're still rooting for that character, and I think it still does something to you as a person.
Okay, let's talk more about your project. Can you explain to us what Blood Runs Down is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Blood Runs Down is a short Southern Gothic horror film. It takes place the night before a little girl's 7th birthday. She and her mother are preparing for the night, and her mother undergoes this sort of odd transition and becomes essentially another person. And the little girl has to determine whether or not she should save her mother or save herself from her mother. And so it's essentially a story about one of the hottest subtext topics of last year, I think, generational trauma. But it's very specific to Black women and girls.
Okay. And how did you choose which film festivals to submit to?
I say this is my first film. It's not technically my first film, but I feel like I can say that. I'll say this was my first film with any kind of reasonable budget, with a producer attached. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff was very new to me. I took some of her recommendations. My producer is Lauren Domino, with submitting to festivals that were interested in Black films. We submitted to horror festivals. We submitted to festivals interested in films by women filmmakers, and a couple of different city festivals. We kind of went all over the place, and we've screened at around 10 so far, including some other non-festival related screenings. And it's a year later, we're still on the festival circuit lightly. But what's interesting is the film never really fit in neatly into any of the blocks. And I'm still amazed that it was selected for as many festivals as it has been selected for, because it's 17 and a half minutes. And so, now knowing what I know about programming and putting together a shorts block, especially, that's a lot of time to request for a film that doesn't fit neatly into a particular category. So as a person who's really insecure occasionally about my work, I think that's been very affirming for me to know that out of a pool, this film still made it out. This really odd film that's a horror, but not really scary. You know, it exists in all these weird ways. And we've won a couple of awards, a couple of nominations since. So
nice.
It surpassed my expectations as a first time filmmaker, sort of.
Congrats, that's dope.
Thank you.
So you said it's not scary, but there's mysticism in it, right?
Yeah, there's mysticism. There's a feeling. I think what I'm more interested in than gore and blood a lot of time, although I do like those movies as well. What I'm more interested in is this feeling of anxiety or discomfort or being unsettled by something. One of my favorite films last year was Hereditary, and it captured this perfect feeling that I've been trying to capture in a lot of my work too, of just dread. And I think that's a really interesting thing for people to reckon with in themselves or watching the character go through it. So I focused more on those emotions, but then I also focused on healing because it was, in a way, this film was I consider my work very spiritual. So this film was a healing mechanism for me and a lot of my crew. So yeah, you know, you're not going to get, I think you're not going to get a lot of jumps or anything like that. Some people still had an issue with, you know, oh, I don't do horror, so I'll have to catch your next one. And like, I promise it's not scary. It's not scary. But that is a goal. I'm trying to step that up in the future.
So why is it important for you to tell stories that incorporate spirituality?
I think that so one of my favorite subgenres of horror is supernatural, kind of like your ghost stories, stuff like that. I've always been interested in that, and I think it also has something to do with me being a Louisiana girl, you know, born and raised from the village of Rosedale outside of Plaquemine. You know, these are names nobody's heard of. The closest I can say is maybe Baton Rouge as a reference.
Okay.
But that energy is always around us here. It's always been around me. Just looking into my grandmother's backyard, and the row of trees behind it is a sugarcane field. You know, so there's always kind of like this haunted setting of what happened here, what happened in this land. Even right now, you know, I'm talking to you from the third floor of an apartment on the French Quarter. What happened here? There's just so many stories just layered and kind of screaming on top of each other here. So I think I've always been drawn to the paranormal end of things. And with Blood Runs Down, I had to really engage with some past traumas that I've endured in life. I think writing that script kind of came to where it was over the past, I would say, 5 years or so. And it's taken on different shapes, and some have been better than others, but Blood Runs Down is the result of it. And it was me coping with, you know, one, growing up without my mother, who endured kind of a mental breakdown, reconciling with my Christianity, my spirituality, which was at the source of that breakdown for her. Just a lot of really odd things happened for me at that time in my life. So I think, I don't know, I think it's just naturally always been speaking to me. And I think that there's something very serious to be noted about how we move spiritually. And that's what a lot of horror is missing out on. Because that's scary. That stuff can be scary. For me, that feels very real.
What do you find? Why do you think it's scary?
You know, I have a series of stories that I occasionally tell friends about when I was in high school and when my mom was going through this breakdown, because she was very absent. So I had to do a lot of raising myself. And sometimes when I tell these stories to people, they almost feel fake because I'm like, I forget that this experience really happened to me. You know, really, really happened to me. So I don't know. I'm like, do I want to go into story time?
It's up to you.
So one, for instance, was to give context. A lot of what went down with my mom's diagnosis, which eventually it was diagnosed as bipolar. It looks more like schizophrenia, which you'll see a lot of that kind of play out in Blood Runs Down as well. But there were lots of claims of our family having committed sins and being witches, and that we were cursed and we had to repent and all these things. And I've been a person who at that point had been in church for most of my life, had been raised Christian, had prayed nightly, and my room, all the things that I owned were kind of cleared because the claim was that they opened this sort of portal for bad energy, bad spirits to come in. So this is what I was growing up with around high school, and it's so interesting that I see so many documentaries. There's one by Jessica Janae's Devant Je Caleve, which kind of deals with a similar experience with her mother, and it's such a thing with Black women that's interesting. But it's on the one end you can say, okay, it's very clear that you have a mental illness, you have this diagnosis, and that's what's happening. But on the other end, so many things, so many claims that she made seem to be validated by the things that were happening in my life. And so one of them, when she was early on, was that mentally ill people aren't mentally ill, they're possessed, or they're demons, or they're spirits. So creatively, years later, when I was writing, I thought about how her health deteriorated, and how as it was deteriorating, she kept making these calls for help, or saying, I feel like something is taking over me. And so that stuff kind of sticks with you, even when you're trying to be logically minded. Yeah. So I used it as creative fodder, as healing fodder. I meditated around, what that meant for me and our likenesses. But that's sort of what I mean. I mean, it's metaphorically real, and depending on what your beliefs are, it's just real. Yeah. And I'm still sorting that out for myself.
I understand. Yeah, that's definitely I understand what you mean by it being scary now, and that's amazing that you're willing to put yourself out there and be vulnerable in your work. I'm genuinely excited to see the entire short.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel most comfortable when everything is out on the table, at the risk of oversharing a lot of things, but I feel most comfortable when I have nothing to hide, and when how I'm feeling, what I've been through is communicated. So this was like the perfect conduit for that, this film.
I know you said this is your first short. Did you do any other like horror, spiritual storytelling? Maybe like a short story when you were younger. Like, what was your
I think when I was younger, I think I did more sci-fi. Interestingly enough, which I have a bit more trouble writing now. But I was more there. I did write horror here and there, short stories and things like that. But when I did sit down to start the first script that would eventually turn into Blood Runs Down, I had a really hard time writing horror. I've had an easier time writing drama, writing comedy, but it's something about trying to scare a person or trying to introduce fear to a person that it takes a setup. It's timing, it's performance, it's all of those things. And so I went from writing out like a list of scares, and then I was like, no, this isn't the project for that. This isn't one of those. It's not going to work within that structure. So I just went back to the core of my own experiences, why they frighten me and how they frighten me, and use that. And that's what I've been doing. It's around fear, but a lot of what I've been writing lately has been just based on my experience, good and bad, of growing up as a child in southern Louisiana.
Yeah. Okay. What were there any fundamental differences in regards to filming Blood Runs Down compared to your other projects?
No, because so Blood Runs Down is the first project that I've really collaborated with people on. And since it's had the success that it's had, there has been calls for more scripts and short films, and all that stuff is coming. But yeah, this was the first time that I really was able to pull together a crew, a great crew. We connected very well. We had a very easy time on set. And everyone was very respectful and supportive of me. I don't know what it's like to work in this industry in other cities, but New Orleans is doing it. I love my crew out here. They really uplifted me, especially considering, many of them are much more accomplished than me at this point. So yeah, I needed that.
So I actually wanted to go back to the film festivals. Was the process of getting into those festivals or submitting it difficult?
I didn't necessarily find it to be difficult. I just felt it to be time consuming, especially towards the end. I was doing a lot of submissions by myself, still working, still trying to create new content, writing more. So balancing those things and, and handling deliverables for one festival while I'm at another, having gotten a notification from that festival late. So the things were there, but, you can only do so much at a time.
Yeah.
I think definitely that's something I would love for another person to handle next time.
No, we're all there.
But it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting every time we got an acceptance. So I couldn't complain too much.
Did you get into any festivals that? Well, I mean, okay, so you said that your film really stood out in the short blocks. So are there not film festivals that your short would fit into? Like, do they not exist?
I'm sure they do, and I'm sure that more as horror starts to bloom in the way that it has been for the past few years. I'm sure that there will be an entire blocks of films more similar to mine, in theme and production and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm just not sure what they are. I'll admit to being pretty new to this thing in a lot of ways. But horror film festivals, in those blocks, we looked a little out of place because everything else was it was either horror comedy or blood and guts or ghost girls, and then, Southern Gothic horror somewhere wedged into that. This film would maybe pair with something like an Eve's Bayou or a Daughters of the Dust. And where do those films screen?
Yeah.
So maybe I felt most at home. Well, I felt most at home in New Orleans because that New Orleans Film Festival and the New Orleans Film Society has uplifted me and supported me in so many ways since I was in college. So they've been doing that for years. I felt most home there, but I think also at Black Star, where the quality of work really shines and the diversity of it. Yeah. And the other ones, it worked, but it was just for a person who's insecure, it was like, oh gosh, so we're screening these films and here comes my film, which is a hard left. But I think it's there. I think they're there. And I think as I continue to sort of clarify my voice in future works, it'll fit. It may fit more solidly, or it might not, and maybe that's a great thing. I would love to be doing something innovative in the future, something more innovative.
Yeah, exactly. Have you experienced obstacles as a Black woman horror filmmaker?
Yes, I want to say yes, but not the obstacles that I know are in the future, right? Because I'm still, I'm still keeping my crew, my production, and people that I work with very local to New Orleans, and the film industry here is great, but it's still blooming. It's still, blossoming into something. It's not New York. It's not LA. I had a huge worry because I have set anxiety. I think that's different now. I used to say I hate being on set, but I usually do. Any set shoot, I just feel very uncomfortable there. I've always felt most comfortable writing, working with actors ahead of time, but just the hierarchy and the rushed energy of the set makes me nervous. I'm always afraid that I'm doing the wrong thing. So that was a concern for me. But I think, I have to tell myself, well, you're directing this film. You can kind of dictate the energy on the set. We had a roughly we had a decent sized crew, not more than what we needed. But everyone respected each other, and the conversations that we had with one another about respect, about spirituality, about where this film was coming from for me personally in my past experience, I think it kind of set the standards of how we work with one another. And I think those people are just naturally respectful. So I got to set on day one thinking I would be nervous, and I felt completely relaxed, completely at home. There were occasionally times where, I was like, I'm sharing something really personal. I questioned why I even wanted to do this in the first place. But I think for the most part, I've been very fortunate, but I'm not going to kid myself either, because I still know where I stand, or where filmmakers like me stand in this industry, and that there's a lot of obstacles ahead. So I try to ready myself for those in the best way that I can, try to toughen my skin, and that's what I can do for now, I guess.
Okay. So you've talked a lot about, how much you love working in New Orleans. Can you give us can you sell us real quick on filming in New Orleans, or being a filmmaker in New Orleans?
Yeah, I have this feeling, and a lot of other people around me have this feeling as well. There are people working in New Orleans right now who are making incredible work, but in the next 5 years are going to blow up. There's just incredible work coming from here. There's a very supportive, solid community. We know each other. Most of us know each other. There's different, groups, but that's kind of the nature of New Orleans. It's a small, big city, It's laid back. It's called the Big Easy for a reason. So the the way that you're working with people is going to be a little different. You might have to like shoot times, set times. People are going to be there on time. Just certain things flow differently. It's calmer. I'll say that. And Louisiana just has a diversity of locations to shoot at. It looks like so many places in the world, depending on where you go. Nowhere looks like the French Quarter, but then the French Quarter also looks like parts of the Caribbean and France, depending on where you go. Yeah. You have the bayous, you have the fields, you have all these things, the swamps. So there's just a lot to work with. There's a lot of richness here. And it's a good place to be happy. I'm very happy here. There's always something filmable. People come here and shoot a lot of documentaries on things like the Mardi Gras Indians when they're suited up before parades, or on second Sundays when they're marching through the streets. Or Super Sunday. I'm sorry. So yeah, there's a lot. There's balance here. It's a city that you can work in and thrive in, but it's also a city where you can relax and be home and, form a family, whatever that means to you, whether it's your friends, your community, your partner. That's what I love about it. It's always been home.
Nice. Yeah, we went down, Black Film Space went down for the New Orleans Film Festival, and
That's right.
Yeah, a lot of what you just said, you could see that, why that's true. So, Blood Runs Down was chosen for the Tricentennial Story Incubator.
Correct.
Can you tell us more about the process of that and what that is?
Yeah, so it's a matching grant from New Orleans Film Society, Kickstarter, Film New Orleans, New Orleans Video Access Center, NOVAC, and it was celebrating the city's 300th birthday by supporting grants from filmmakers who are based in the city. A $5,000 grant provided that you fund the first $5,000 on Kickstart. They give you support to create your campaign and to see it through. And so everyone who got the grant successfully raised at least $5,000. Some went higher in their goals, and they met that and supported us with the grant. Had a little showcase of the screens, which were all very diverse, doc projects, narratives, with different protagonist focus, with different, subject matter. So that's one of the things that I'm talking about is, there's funding here for people who are passionate about telling stories that are important to the city and the people who live in it, or just Louisiana in general. So I'll say that they're very invested in pushing the work of filmmakers within this region.
Mm-hmm.
And from the South. They also have the Southern Producers Lab, because whenever I went to other festivals, something that I did notice was the South was way underrepresented. You know, it was rare for me to meet another person from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, any of them, you know. So it's important for me that work and that perspective gets shown as well.
Yeah, definitely. How did you raise money for your project?
When we were fundraising, I think it was only 3 of us on the project at that time. So we went back to my hometown, did a little photo shoot there, kind of conceptualized how we wanted it to look. I worked with my co-producer Alexis Clark, and production designer Leila Ray, and they're both very talented. So we kind of put together a mood book of what the film looked like and what it was about and what we were trying to communicate with a lot of Leila's original work, original photography. And, you know, our community came out and supported just like that. And I think, I mean, you know, you only want to crowdfund, especially so many times.
Yeah.
It's rough. Mm-hmm. It was a ride, but out of the 5,000, I think we got 2,000 maybe in the first 2 days, something like that. So it moved pretty quickly. And yeah, we got it done. We explained the project as clearly as we could, tried to make it appeal to people and still be what it was. And, you know, the 3 of us, we did that.
Nice. Do you have any advice for horror filmmakers whose budget may not be large enough for, you know, special effects that you might see in a mainstream Hollywood film?
Yeah, I would say, you know, horror is a genre that for a while now has been known. You don't need a lot of money to make a horror film. You use it as a creative challenge. If you don't have the budget for CGI, consider not doing CGI. What's a better solution for that? You know, usually, even with Blood Runs Down, we had some effects and we did them practically, and I think they worked out better. But see what the creative solution is to the problems that you have. Another thing that I learned was if you don't have money, you need to have time. You need to have so much time. There was a shoot that I had scheduled for next weekend, actually, with a small crew, and they all understood it was a passion project. I said, you know, we don't have Blood Runs Down money. And we talked about it, and we said, you know what, we're going to push this back in 2 more months so that we can be fully prepared and, you know, solve all the problems on this list without getting to set, being overwhelmed, and not knowing what to do. Also, and this is one that I have a huge problem with, but I'm working on. Just ask people, just reach out, and you'll be surprised at what other people have to offer.
Yeah.
What other people are willing to offer.
Yep.
For me, the hardest part about working on a film is reaching out to crew members, because for such a long time I was like, why would anybody want to work with me? You know, I don't have any. Why would I ask this DP to work on my film, payment or not? You know, what's the benefit in you? And with Blood Runs Down, I was really shocked, but especially after with this short film that I'm working on now, anyone that I've briefly mentioned it to has said, oh, well, let me know. I'd love to be on set, or I have this to offer, or I'd love to do this. You will be surprised at what you can get, because the worst they can say is no.
Yep. Exactly.
The worst they can say is no, but you won't know unless you ask. So that's something I've been trying to practice.
So on your website, it mentions that your work generally pays homage to Afrofuturist writers like Octavia Butler. Can you elaborate more on that, and who else has influenced your work in this genre?
Yeah, so I say Octavia, but she's probably the main Afrofuturist writer that I can cite. One of my favorite books, if not my favorite, is Parable of the Sower. And then the follow-up, Parable of the Talents, is great too. And I also love Kindred. So I think what she did with mood and tone in those books really spoke to me. And maybe that's my interest in like the Southern Gothic too, is this interest in darkness and how we deal with oppression in our identities. So she's always played a key role, even if Afrofuturism was something that never really quite made it to Blood Runs Down. I don't think it needed to, but it was always, her books and her story were always in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Another author who has really been inspiring me lately is Toni Morrison. And I've been reading her newest book, The Source of Self-Regard, which is just like a collection of different essays and things. But mostly it's her narrative work. So, for instance, Beloved, I had been familiar with the story before Blood Runs Down. I'd been familiar with the movie. I'd never watched the movie all the way through nor read the book. So earlier this year, I went ahead and read the book in full. And, that's another thing, like that Southern Gothic, the way that she captured the grief and all the pain and the emotion that was linked to those characters and to that land and to that house felt so specific to me and spoke to me in such a particular way, that I wish I'd read it before Blood Runs Down, because, it would have inspired so many things. So I think with literature, it's a lot about tone and what things do to me tonally.
Can you explain what Afrofuturism is?
Yeah, so I think for my definition, and many people may not agree with this, and there's probably also just a solid definition of Afrofuturism, but the way that I understand it is looking both to the past and the future and interpreting what our existence is within that. So, for instance, Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler tells the story of this almost post-apocalyptic America where the greed of the country has depleted it of resources and people are zoned off, and you have this young black female protagonist essentially creating a religion or a type of thought for herself and others to follow. And that's where the phrase "Make America Great Again" actually first appears. Way before Trump was in Parable of the Sower, which is crazy to me. Which is crazy, like she's still speaking. And even in Kindred, it's been a while since I read Kindred, but I believe a woman is transported back into the times of slavery, her and her white husband, and it deals a lot with her ownership of her body and the colonization of her mind and how easy it was for a person to become comfortable with slavery or to become complicit to it in some way. So I think it deals with our existence. It thinks to the future, referencing the past and critiquing the present. That's the definition that I would give it.
Can you elaborate more on how that relates to horror in general?
Yeah, there's a documentary out on Shudder by Ashley Blackwell and Tanana Reed, a horror writer. Ashley Blackwell is a journalist. It's called Horror Noir, and Tanana Reed, I believe, says something in there. But she says Black history is Black horror. Black history is a lot of things, but our stories, especially in this country, I would say the entire diaspora, are horrific. Our circumstances at times, though very, very beautiful, are horrific. To survive has been, so much of Black culture is based on survival. So for me in horror, it's always been astounding that Black stories haven't been at the forefront because we have so much natural material to work from. It's a miracle that we are still here. All we know is survival.
Why do you think that horror hasn't been mainstream amongst African American audiences?
I think it has, in an odd way, or not even in an odd way, in a particular way. I think it's been entertainment. We all have this stereotype of going to a movie theater that's filled with Black people for a horror movie and everybody's talking and responding, telling them to get out, all that stuff. And I think maybe that was easier to do when you have less of an attachment to the people on the screen or their decisions, that the characters' motivations don't really justify it, or there's not much to root for. But I think we've always been there. I have a bit of a problem where, and I'm trying to remedy this. If it's horror and it comes out, I go and see it. That's just that. It doesn't have to be good. I can know from the previews this is going to be awful, but it's still entertaining to me. So I often go and see it. And those audiences are Black, and it's not based on the theater that I pick. When I go to see The Nun, I'm there with a room full of Black people. So we're there. We're just, I don't know if we've ever had much of a reason to be very invested.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the change is now. And other people are invested too who are not Black, and that's what Jordan Peele has been showing so much with what he's doing, and it's shocking people that you can care about Black stories and Black characters. But I think that's the switch. We've always been there, but now we're invested. Now there are stakes for us as well.
So, do you have any recommendations for horror films that feature a Black cast? Like any recommendations, movies we may not have heard of?
Well, let's see. So I'm all Southern Gothic, so my heart immediately goes to Eve's Bayou, which some people don't recognize, and I can understand not recognizing it as a horror film. But another one that I've been watching and getting some different inspiration from is Ganja and Hez. It was supposed to be a blaxploitation film, but the director kind of wanted to go a different route. So aesthetically, it kind of feels that way, but it's also very experimental in nature. The actors are beautiful. It's moving. So that's one film that I would recommend. I wish I had more. I wish I had more films like that in my camp, but I'm looking to discover them and to make them.
Okay. So what's up next for you then?
So at the moment, I'm working on a short film, the one that I mentioned before. It'll be a lot shorter, than the 17 minutes. And that'll come out sometime at the end of this year. We're shooting it in June. And while I do that, I'm writing a feature film, which I was afraid to do, but, it's a thing about permission and the idea that I would have the audacity to go from making a short film to writing and making a feature. But I'm writing it. I'm really excited. This will be the second feature that I've written. The first, I kind of stopped and realized that this wasn't what I wanted to be my first feature. So yeah, I'm excited, and I guess expect more shorts and other projects in that time as this feature is being developed.
Okay, nice. Well, good luck with all of that. Where can our audience find you on social media?
Yeah, so nobody has my name, so it's just my first name on Twitter and Instagram, Zandashe, Zandashe. And my website is just Zandashe.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Zandashe, for joining us on the Black Film Space podcast. Appreciate your insight and your opinions on film. And when can we see Blood Runs Down?
Blood Runs Down is figuring out its distribution right now, if it'll be online or if it's going to platforms. So I'll definitely update people through social media. But for now, it might make a couple more festival appearances over the next few months. So I would keep an eye out for that.
All right. Let us know if you're coming to New York.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.